begin with a clarification, if not a retraction, of something I said at the end of the last video, if I remember correctly. I said, I think, that we might get more conclusions in subsequent videos. We are in Chapter 8, the conclusions William James draws in a pluralistic universe. Lecture 8, the conclusions James draws in a pluralistic universe. Now, I think we have two conclusions so far, and honestly I'm not sure if we're going to get any more. So that's the clarification or the retraction. I think maybe the remainder of this lecture is just going to be clarifying his views and reiterating some major arguments for his views. Now, these arguments have occurred in the earlier lectures, and he's reiterating them. He spent a whole lot of time developing these ideas earlier. Now he's briefly reiterating some of the big ones so as to clarify and argue for his own view. And his own view, as presented in Lecture 8 so far, is these two conclusions. One, it is probable, based on the evidence of religious experience, that there is such a thing as a divine mind, some sort of superhuman consciousness that our minds make contact with and are, in some sense, continuous with. We are not separate from the mind of God. And two, this God is better thought of pluralistically than monistically. And that doesn't mean that there's more than one God, although maybe that's a thing. It means that the big God, the best God, the greatest God, should not be considered to be infinite, great but not infinite. I believe in the finite God, says William James. Not all reality is contained within God. In other words, a pluralistic model of the universe rather than Hegelian monistic pantheism is better. A pluralistic universe is the better theory. Okay, so I continue to approach this book, let's say, taking baby steps towards understanding it. I continue to approach this book hoping to get a better understanding of it through the series, and I think it's been largely successful. I can't say I've mastered this book, or I'm likely to before I finish this series, but I think I've improved in my understanding of this book, which is one of my major goals here. Let's see, I still can't just bring a complete interpretation of this book and just tell you in one short paragraph what this book is saying, what it's about. I'm trying to build up, actually empirically, in a way that I think makes sense when we're thinking like James. I'm trying to build up an understanding of this book from the ground up, piece by piece, rather than take a top-down interpretation and make sense of the book that way. Maybe once I built up a good enough interpretation, I can do that, but we're not there yet. So in the next video, I might say something familiar, something about pragmatism and empiricism, and about our ideas and our actions having an effect on the final result. But in this video, I just want to look at about half a paragraph, it's a long paragraph, but half a paragraph of William James on the competition of ideas. Now, you might make some comparisons to evolutionary theory and the survival of the fittest, or to capitalist theory and the survival and flourishing of the stronger company in a competition of different companies. Probably best understood, if you're going to read it this way, you would take this paragraph and say that if it compares to economics and business, the lesson is that the stronger company wins because it's doing the most good. It's serving its customers the best. But I don't know that either of those is a good way of thinking through this half paragraph I'm about to read you. It's best to just look at the paragraph and what it actually says. He's talking about the competition of ideas, and he doesn't draw these analogies. He draws some other analogies, but let's get to it. He draws geological analogies. He begins thus. It is true that superstitions and wild-growing overbeliefs of all sorts will undoubtedly begin to abound if the notion of higher consciousness enveloping ours, if Wagnerian earth souls and the like, grows orthodox and fashionable. Still more will they superabound if science ever puts her approving stamp on the phenomena of which Frederick Meyer so earnestly advocated the scientific recognition, the phenomena of psychic research, so-called. And I myself firmly believe that most of these phenomena are rooted in reality. Big sentence. Okay, what is he talking about? He's talking about the fact that if we change our academic standards a little bit, we're going to have a lot of weird ideas out there. And this kind of freaks out academics. Academics don't like a lot of wild ideas having cultural purchase. We don't want every wacky idea to be given a chance to speak. Or the whole reason we're here is to weed out the terrible ideas and just teach the best ones. That's how academics think. Now, this connects to all kinds of stuff in William James. He refers to psychic research. So this goes back to the last essay of the varieties of religion. No, not that one. The last essay of The Will to Believe and Other Essays in Popular Philosophy, What Psychic Research Has Accomplished. An earlier essay of William James where he looks at psychic research. Let's see, it goes back to the ending of the varieties of religious experience, where James talks about overbeliefs. We have the phenomena, and then we can interpret them, and sometimes without failing to interpret the phenomena of experience, but without being forced by experience into one inevitable conclusion, we make a choice between one big belief that interprets everything and another belief that interprets everything, and these are our overbeliefs. Okay, let's see. We're also referencing earlier lectures in this book, in particular, Lecture 4 on the philosophy of Gustav Fechner. So, let me paraphrase the main idea in this sentence. James is an academic, but not like other academics. In fact, let me not paraphrase this sentence yet. Let me go back to another one. There's that lovely remark in The Will to Believe, the essay, also in The Will to Believe and Other Essays in Popular Philosophy, the book. James observes that academics, people at the university, believe in certain ideas not primarily because they know that those ideas have good evidence in their favor, but because someone else thought there was good evidence, and those ideas are the prestigious ones. Our faith is faith in someone else's faith, he says, and it's not the evidence, but it's the prestige of these ideas that makes us believe them, says James. He gives at the time a list of things like molecules and necessary progress and evolution and the Monroe Doctrine, or the importance of fighting for the Monroe Doctrine. Fighting for the doctrine of the immortal Monroe. Monroe Doctrine, evolution, necessary progress, molecules, conservation of energy. Off the top of my head, those are the things from his list. There might be one or two more. In fact, I'm not sure evolution was even in that list, but the other four were. Anyway, James gives a list of ideas that everyone at the university thinks are the right ideas. They are the proper ideas. They are the correct ideas. Democracy might have been listed, but don't quote me on this. I quote James on this in another video, and you can read. Type in The Will to Believe text in your search bar. Press enter. You should find a link to a Gutenberg edition or something of The Will to Believe and Other Essays in Popular Philosophy. Do a Control F shortcut once you've loaded it for Monroe. Monroe. Probably that word will appear only once in the entire book. Anyway. The duty of fighting for the doctrine of the immortal Monroe. Okay, so that's the passage where James talks about how academics have our prestigious ideas, and we like them largely because they're prestigious, and we don't want just any other silly idea coming in. So this sentence here harkens back to that, where we like our prestigious ideas. But he's not emphasizing that. He's emphasizing the worry his audience will no doubt have. He's talking to a very respectable British philosophy student in his very prestigious Hibbert lectures. And he observes that academics have this concern that if we change the rules for what sort of opinions are considered acceptable, we're going to have a lot of weird opinions out there. And James says, in reply, but ought one seriously to allow such a timid consideration as that to deter one from following the evident path of greatest religious promise? Since when in this mixed world was any good thing given to us in purest outline and isolation, one of the chief characteristics of life is life's redundancy. The sole condition of our having anything, no matter what, is that we should have so much of it. that we are fortunate if we do not grow sick of the sight and sound of it altogether. Everything is smothered in the litter that is fated to accompany it. Without too much, you cannot have enough of anything. Without too much, you cannot have enough of anything. We need more things. We need more diversity of things. That's how we'll get the best things, is the idea he's talking about here. Lots of inferior books, lots of bad statues, lots of dull speeches of tenth-rate men and women as a condition of the few precious specimens in either kind being realized. The Gettysburg Address is magnificent. Would we ever have had the Gettysburg Address if we hadn't had 10,000 inferior speeches? If we hadn't put up with all the inferior speeches, would we ever have gotten the jewel that is the Gettysburg Address? Lots of inferior books, lots of bad statues, lots of dull speeches of tenth-rate men and women as a condition of the few precious specimens in either kind being realized. The gold dust comes to birth with the court sand all around it, and this is as much a condition of religion as of any other excellent possession. You want to get the best ideas, the best religion, the best philosophy. Let different ideas have their say. The good ones will eventually be recognized as the good ones. Or at least the better ones will eventually be recognized as the better ones. There must be extrication. There must be competition for survival. So actually that might be a reference to evolutionary theory. I wouldn't have expected him to do a business illustration, but I would have expected him to do... Actually, James might have done a business illustration. Never mind. Another time, maybe. There must be extrication, there must be competition for survival, perhaps a reference to evolutionary survival of the fittest. But the clay matrix and the noble gem must first come into being unsifted. So there's more emphasis on the geological metaphors. You want gold? You find it in sand. You want more gold? Start with lots of sand. You want good ideas? Start with lots of ideas, even if many of them are bad. Once extricated, the gem can be examined separately, conceptualized, defined, and insulated, but this process of extrication cannot be short-circuited, or if it is, that is to say, if you cut off this process of letting different ideas have their say and argue over them, you might miss out on the good ideas. You might, if you short-circuit the process, you might end up with some ideas that are not the best taking over artificially when they haven't really deserved it. The process of extrication cannot be short-circuited, or if it is, you get the thin, inferior abstractions which we have seen, either the hollow, unreal God of scholastic theology or the unintelligible pantheistic monster, instead of the more living divine reality with which it appears certain that empirical methods tend to connect men in imagination. So this goes back to, my goodness, it's hard to keep everything straight, probably lecture 1, where he sets aside scholastic Christianity, scholastic theology, scholastic dualistic theology, I think was his term. Yes, this appears to be chapter 1. Dualistic theism, where there's God and there's the world God created, and they're totally separate. He sets that idea aside. He's interested in pantheism. All is divine. All is connected to God. He's interested mainly in the distinction between a pluralistic and a monistic pantheism. Okay, so the hollow, unreal God of scholastic theology, the God we can't relate to, the God who has nothing to do with us as far as we can tell, because this God is completely different from the world God created, and completely separate. The hollow, unreal God of scholastic theology is one of those ideas that might triumph if we short-circuit the sifting process, the process of extrication, or the unintelligible pantheistic monster. That's the God of the Hegelians. So between the God of scholastic theism, the hollow, unreal God, or the unintelligible pantheistic monster of Hegelian pantheism, William James says, no, neither. I reject both. Those are ideas that might take over if we short-circuit the process of extricating the best ideas from a competition of ideas. And what is the better idea? The more living divine reality with which it appears certain that empirical methods tend to connect men in imagination. Experience connects us to an idea of a living God we can have some connection to, who is not the whole of reality, and in whose efforts to make a better world we can play some meaningful part. More on that in the next video.